came home early that Friday, expecting to find Kara curled up on the couch with her usual glass of wine and whatever reality show was destroying brain cells that week. Instead, I found her in our bedroom, sliding into a dress that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. The black fabric was so sheer it might as well have been made of wishful thinking, and underneath, nothing, not a damn thing. "What's the occasion?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Victoria's Secret Convention?" She turned to face me, and I caught that look in her eyes, the one that said she thought she was about to blow my mind with some earth-shattering revelation. Kara had always been dramatic, but lately her performances had taken on a particularly cruel edge. "What if I told you I'm meeting 2 of my exes tonight?" she said, running her hands down the sides of that ridiculous dress. "Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." I couldn't help but laugh. After 15 years of marriage, she still thought she could shock me. "What would you do if I said you're not?" Her smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, Nick, still trying to control me? We both know you don't have the balls to actually do anything about it." That's when I pulled out my phone. Kara watched, confused, as I dialed the number I'd memorized 3 days ago. The Ritz Carlton answered on the second ring. "Yes, I'd like to cancel a reservation," I said, putting the call on speaker. "Room 447, under the name Catherine Mills." Kara's face went white. Catherine Mills was her maiden name, the alias she thought was so clever. "Certainly, sir. The reservation for tonight has been canceled. Will there be anything else?" "Actually, yes. Could you please confirm that the 2 gentlemen who were supposed to meet Ms. Mills have also been contacted? Their wives wanted to make sure they got the message." The silence in our bedroom was deafening. Kara's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't have information about other guests' arrangements," the hotel clerk said professionally. "No problem. They'll figure it out soon enough. Thank you." I hung up and reached into my jacket pocket, pulling out a manila envelope that had been burning a hole there for the past week. "Divorce papers," I said, tossing it onto the bed. "Along with screenshots of every text message you've sent to Ethan Brooks and Derek Lynn for the past 3 months. Oh, and that recording you made last week, bragging to Megan about your adventure plans. You remember, the one where you called me a pathetic loser who'd never have the spine to leave you?" Kara's phone started buzzing. Then it started ringing. Then it started doing both simultaneously as messages and calls flooded in. I could see the names flashing on her screen. Ethan, Derek, Becca Brooks, Linda Lynn. "You see, honey," I continued, my voice calm as a lake before a storm, "while you were planning your little threesome fantasy, I was having some very interesting conversations with Becca and Linda. Turns out wives don't appreciate it when their husbands plan hotel room adventures with other women. Who knew?" The phone kept buzzing. Kara finally grabbed it, and I watched her face cycle through every emotion in the book as she read the messages. Ethan's wife was threatening legal action. Derek's wife was promising to take him for everything he was worth, and both men were frantically trying to figure out how their perfect plan had blown up in their faces. "How did you—" Kara started. "No," I finished. "Kara, you've been using the same iCloud account for years. Every message, every photo, every dirty little secret has been automatically syncing to the iPad in my office. I've been reading your conversations like a really twisted soap opera." She sank onto the bed, that see-through dress suddenly looking less like seduction and more like desperation. "Nick, I can explain." "Explain what? How you've been planning to humiliate me? How you told your boyfriends I was too weak to fight back? How you convinced Megan to lie for you while you destroyed our marriage?" My phone buzzed with a text from Rick, my foreman. "Package delivered, both cards disabled, credit cards frozen. She's officially stranded." I smiled. "Oh, and Kara? Your car won't start, your credit cards have been canceled, and your Uber account has been suspended due to suspicious activity. I'd offer you a ride, but I wouldn't want to control you." As I walked toward the door, I turned back one more time. "Change clothes. You look desperate. Oh, wait. You are." The sound of her phone exploding with angry calls and messages followed me down the hallway. After 15 years of marriage, Kara had finally gotten the reaction she'd been pushing for. She just hadn't expected it to be the one that would destroy her entire world. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been the kind of husband who believed in trust and communication. I'd been the kind of man who thought his wife's late nights at the office were actually about work, and that her sudden interest in yoga classes and girls' nights out were signs of healthy independence. I'd been, in other words, a complete idiot. The wake-up call came on a Tuesday morning when Kara left her iPad on the kitchen counter. A message popped up from someone named E saying, Can't wait to see you in that dress tonight. Derek's going to lose his mind. That's when I learned about iCloud syncing. That's when I discovered that my wife of 15 years had been living a double life that would make a spy jealous. And that's when I realized that the woman I'd been married to was not just cheating, she was planning to humiliate me in the most public way possible. I called in sick to work and spent the entire day reading through months of messages. Kara and her friend Megan had been planning what they called Operation Freedom for half a year. The plan was simple. Kara would have her fun with Ethan and Derek, document everything, and then use the evidence to paint me as an inadequate husband who drove her to seek satisfaction elsewhere. She'd get the house, half my construction business, and the sympathy of everyone in town. The messages were brutal. Kara described me as emotionally unavailable and intimately boring. She told her lovers that I was too focused on work to notice what was happening under my own roof. She even joked that I was so pathetic, I'd probably thank her for finally putting us both out of our misery. But the worst part wasn't what she said about me, it was what she said about them. Ethan Brooks was married to Becca, a divorce attorney who'd built her reputation on destroying cheating husbands. They had 2 kids and a mortgage on a house that was already underwater. Ethan sold real estate and thought he was God's gift to women because he'd been named Salesman of the Month 3 times running. Kara called him eager but clueless and joked that he reminded her of a golden retriever. All enthusiasm, no technique. Derek Lynn was worse. He was married to Linda, a pharmaceutical executive who made twice what he did and never let him forget it. Derek ran a small tech startup that was hemorrhaging money, and he'd been telling Kara that she was his escape from a marriage that felt like a business arrangement. Kara's messages about Derek were particularly cruel. She called him desperate and said she was only including him because 2 is better than 1 for the shock value. Neither man knew about the other. Kara had been playing them against each other for months, promising each one that he was special, that he was the one who understood her in ways her boring husband never could. She'd been planning to spring the threesome idea on them at the hotel, figuring their egos and their lust would override any common sense. She was probably right, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. I called Anita Parsons, a private investigator I'd worked with on some insurance fraud cases. Anita was ex-police, the kind of woman who'd seen every form of human stupidity and had developed a professional appreciation for creative justice. So your wife is planning to cheat on you with 2 married men, document the whole thing, and then use it to destroy you in divorce court? Anita summarized after I'd laid out the whole story. That's the plan. And you want to what exactly? Catch them in the act? That's pretty standard stuff, Nick. No, I said. I want to make sure they never make it to the act. I want to blow up their whole plan before it starts, and I want everyone in town to know exactly what kind of people they are. Anita was quiet for a long moment. That's not standard stuff. That's psychological warfare. They started the war. I'm just going to finish it. She agreed to help, and over the next 3 weeks, we built our counter-operation. Anita confirmed the hotel reservation, the timing, and the fact that Megan was actively helping coordinate the whole thing. She also did background checks on Ethan and Derek that revealed some interesting information. Ethan had been cheating on Becca for years, but he'd been careful about it. One-night stands, out-of-town conferences, nothing that could be traced back to him. He thought he was untouchable because his wife was busy with her law practice and their kids. What he didn't know was that Becca had been getting suspicious and had already started documenting his behavior. Derek's situation was even more precarious. His startup was failing, and Linda had been talking about pulling her financial support. He'd been using company credit cards for personal expenses, including the hotel rooms where he'd been meeting Kara for their planning sessions. One call to Linda about unauthorized charges would be enough to destroy him financially. But I didn't want to destroy them financially. I wanted something much more satisfying. I wanted to destroy them socially. In a town like ours, reputation was everything. These people had been planning to humiliate me publicly, so I was going to return the favor. The first step was gathering evidence. Thanks to iCloud, I had every message, every photo, every detail of their plan. The second step was building a network of witnesses. That's where Mrs. Doyle came in. Mrs. Doyle lived next door and had been the unofficial neighborhood watch coordinator for 30 years. She knew everyone, saw everything, and had a network of gossips that could spread information faster than the internet. I'd always thought of her as a harmless busybody, but Anita helped me see her for what she really was, the town's information hub. I started having casual conversations with Mrs. Doyle about Kara's new fitness routine and her frequent girls' nights out. I mentioned how proud I was that she was making new friends and exploring new interests. Mrs. Doyle's radar immediately started pinging. "New friends?" she asked, leaning over the fence that separated our yards. "I don't recall seeing any new women visiting." Oh, not women, I said innocently. She's been meeting with some old friends from high school, Ethan Brooks and Derek Lynn. You might know them. Ethan's married to that lawyer, Becca, and Derek's wife, Linda, works for that pharmaceutical company. Mrs. Doyle's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. She knew exactly who those people were, and she also knew that married people meeting with other married people for fitness routines was worth investigating. The third step was the most important, making sure that when everything exploded, I was nowhere near the blast radius. I needed to be the innocent, betrayed husband who'd discovered his wife's affair, not the mastermind who'd orchestrated its exposure. That's where Rick came in. Rick Soto had been my foreman for 5 years, and he was the kind of guy who understood loyalty and justice in equal measure. When I explained what Kara was planning, his reaction was immediate and volcanic. "She's going to what?" he said, his voice rising to a pitch that could shatter glass. "Keep it down," I said. We were in my office at the construction site, but sound carried in the prefab buildings we used as headquarters. "Nick, that's not just cheating. That's evil. She's trying to destroy you." "I know. That's why I need your help." Rick was all in from the moment I finished explaining the plan. He understood that sometimes justice required a little creativity, and he had the skills to make sure our creativity didn't cross any legal lines. The night before Kara's planned hotel adventure, Rick and I made our final preparations. We disabled her car, nothing permanent, just disconnected the battery and removed a few key fuses. We arranged for her credit cards to be temporarily frozen due to suspicious activity. A few calls to customer service reporting that we'd seen unauthorized charges was enough to trigger their fraud protection protocols. And we made sure that both Ethan and Derek would be walking into the hotel with their wives already aware of exactly what they'd planned to do there. As I watched Kara's world start to crumble in our bedroom that Friday night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: satisfaction. For the first time since I'd discovered her betrayal, I wasn't the victim. I was the one in control. And this was just the beginning. Saturday morning brought the annual Founders' Day festival to the town square, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world. After spending the night at Rick's place, I told him I couldn't bear to be in the same house as Kara after her confession. I was ready for the next phase of my plan. The festival was perfect for my purposes. Everyone would be there: families, couples, local business owners, gossips, and most importantly, all the key players in Kara's drama. It was the kind of event where news spread faster than wildfire and reputations could be built or destroyed in a single conversation. I arrived early and positioned myself at the booth where my construction company was sponsoring the children's activities. It gave me a perfect vantage point to watch the drama unfold while maintaining my cover as the innocent, wounded husband trying to keep up appearances. Kara arrived around 10, looking like she hadn't slept. She'd traded the see-through dress for jeans and a sweater, but she still looked desperate. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she kept checking her phone obsessively. Megan was with her, playing the role of supportive best friend, but I could see the tension between them. "Nick!" Mrs. Doyle appeared at my elbow like a heat-seeking missile. "I heard the most interesting thing this morning." "Oh?" I tried to look disinterested while setting up a ring toss game. Apparently there was quite a commotion at the Ritz last night. Something about married couples having very loud arguments in the lobby. The police were called and everything. I raised my eyebrows in what I hoped looked like mild curiosity. "Really? That's unusual for the Ritz." "Indeed. And you'll never guess who was involved." Mrs. Doyle leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ethan Brooks and Derek Lynn, both with their wives. Apparently there was some sort of misunderstanding about hotel reservations and improper meetings." "That's terrible," I said, shaking my head. "I hope everyone's okay." "Well, that depends on your definition of okay. From what I heard, both marriages are in serious trouble. Becca Brooks was seen leaving the hotel with suitcases, and Linda Lynn was overheard telling someone on the phone that she was calling her lawyer first thing Monday morning." Perfect. Phase 1 was complete. Around noon, Ethan showed up at the festival. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His usual cocky swagger was gone, replaced by the desperate look of a man whose world was falling apart. He spotted me at my booth and started walking over with the kind of determined stride that meant trouble. "Harper," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "We need to talk." "Sure, Ethan. What can I do for you?" I kept my voice friendly and professional, aware that we were surrounded by families and children. "You know damn well what you can do. You sabotaged last night. You called my wife, didn't you?" I looked genuinely confused. "Called Becca? Why would I call your wife? I barely know her." "Don't play dumb. Someone told her about the hotel, about Kara." "Oh." I let understanding dawn on my face slowly. "Oh, Ethan. Are you telling me you were planning to meet my wife at a hotel?" His face went red. Several parents nearby had stopped their conversations to listen. In a town this size, everyone knew everyone, and drama was better than cable television. "It's not what you think," Ethan said, his voice getting louder. "She came on to me. She's been pursuing me for months." "My wife was pursuing you?" I said, loud enough for our growing audience to hear clearly. "Ethan, are you feeling okay? Maybe you should sit down." "I'm not crazy. She texted me constantly, sent me pictures, planned the whole thing." "Pictures?" Mrs. Peterson, who ran the church bake sale, gasped audibly. "What kind of pictures?" asked Mike Sullivan, the fire chief. Ethan realized he'd walked into a trap, but it was too late. "Look, Harper, your wife is not the innocent victim you think she is." "Victim?" I said. "Ethan, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Are you saying my wife did something inappropriate?" "She planned to meet Derek and me at the Ritz last night for—" He stopped, finally realizing that he was confessing to adultery in front of half the town. "For what?" I asked innocently. Ethan's face went from red to purple. He looked around at the crowd of neighbors and family friends who were hanging on every word, and I could see the exact moment he realized he'd destroyed himself. "You bastard," he whispered. "Excuse me?" I said, stepping closer. "What did you just call me?" Ethan was bigger than me, but he was also soft from years of desk work and 3 martini lunches. I'd been swinging hammers and hauling lumber for 20 years. When he took a swing at me, I was ready. I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him forward into the ring toss booth. The wooden structure collapsed under his weight, sending him sprawling into a pile of stuffed animal prizes. Chili from the booth next door splashed all over his designer polo shirt, and the crowd erupted in gasps and nervous laughter. "Ethan," I said, rushing to help him up. "Are you okay? You tripped?" He tried to get up, slipped on the chili, and went down again. This time he landed in a pile of cotton candy that stuck to his hair like pink spider webs. "I didn't trip, you bastard," he yelled from the ground. "Sir," Chief Sullivan stepped forward, "I think you need to calm down. There are children present." "He sabotaged me. He destroyed my marriage." "I destroyed your marriage," I said, looking genuinely hurt. "Ethan, I don't even know what you're talking about. You're the one who just told everyone you were planning to meet my wife at a hotel." The crowd murmured agreement. From their perspective, Ethan had just confessed to planning an affair and then attacked an innocent man who was only trying to help him up. Derek chose that moment to make his entrance. He looked even worse than Ethan. His left eye was swollen shut, and his lip was split. Linda had apparently been more physical in her response to the news than Becca had been. "There he is," Derek pointed at me with a shaking finger. "There's the bastard who ruined everything." "Derek," I said, "what happened to your face? Do you need medical attention?" "You know what happened. You called Linda. You told her about the hotel." "I called Linda?" I looked around at the crowd. "I don't understand. Why does everyone think I called their wives? I don't even have their phone numbers." "Someone called her," Derek insisted. "Someone told her exactly what we were planning." "What were you planning?" asked Mrs. Doyle, who had positioned herself in the front row of our impromptu audience. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He looked at Ethan, who was still trying to get cotton candy out of his hair, then at the crowd of neighbors who were waiting for an answer. We were going to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "They were going to meet my wife at a hotel," I said sadly. "Both of them. Together. At least, that's what Ethan just told everyone." The crowd's reaction was immediate and decisive. These were small-town people with small-town values. Adultery was bad enough, but planning a threesome with someone's wife was beyond the pale. "That's disgusting," said Mrs. Peterson. "Those poor wives," added Chief Sullivan. "In my day, men like that got run out of town," declared old Mr. Kowalski. Derek looked around at the hostile faces and made a decision that proved he was even stupider than I'd thought. He charged at me. I sidestepped again, and Derek ran straight into Ethan, who was finally getting to his feet. They went down in a tangle of limbs, landing in what remained of the chili and cotton candy. "Gentlemen, please," I said, stepping back with my hands raised. "This is a family event. Whatever problems you have with your marriages, this isn't the place to discuss them." Chief Sullivan stepped forward with 2 of his volunteers. "That's enough. You 2 need to leave, now." As Ethan and Derek were escorted away, covered in chili and cotton candy and humiliation, I turned to address the crowd. "I'm sorry everyone had to see that," I said. "I had no idea my wife was involved with these men. I'm as shocked as you are." The sympathy was immediate and overwhelming. Mrs. Doyle patted my shoulder. Mrs. Peterson offered to bring me a casserole. Chief Sullivan shook my hand and told me I'd handled the situation with remarkable restraint. Kara, who had watched the entire scene from across the square, finally approached. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. "Nick," she said quietly, "we need to talk." "I think we've talked enough," I replied. "Besides, I wouldn't want to give people the wrong idea. Apparently you have a reputation now." As she walked away, I could hear the whispers starting behind us. By evening, everyone in town would know that Kara Harper had planned a threesome with 2 married men, and that her husband had only found out when the men themselves had confessed in public. Phase 2 was complete, but I was just getting started. By Sunday morning, the story had spread through town like a virus. My phone hadn't stopped ringing with calls from friends, neighbors, and business associates offering their support and sharing what they'd heard. The version making the rounds was even better than what had actually happened. According to the Gossip Network, Kara had been running a married men's club for months, and Ethan and Derek were just the latest victims of her seduction scheme. I was at the construction site early, trying to catch up on the work I'd missed while planning my revenge, when Rick showed up with coffee and news. "You're not going to believe what happened last night," he said, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "Try me." Someone decorated Ethan's car, really decorated it. Saran wrap, soap writing, the works. And Derek's Tesla got its charging cable cut. Both of them found the damage this morning, right in front of their apartment buildings, with all their neighbors watching. I raised an eyebrow. "Someone?" "Anonymous Good Samaritan, I'd guess. Someone who doesn't appreciate homewreckers." "Interesting. Any idea who might have done such a thing?" "Not a clue, but whoever it was has excellent timing and a real artistic flair. You should have seen the soap writing. Homewrecker in big block letters across the windshield. Very professional work." I couldn't help but smile. Rick had outdone himself. "There's more," he continued. "Anita called this morning. Apparently Kara's boss got an anonymous tip about her conduct and the planned hotel meeting. She's been put on administrative leave pending an investigation." That was unexpected, but welcome news. Kara worked for a conservative financial services company that took their public image very seriously. An employee involved in a public adultery scandal would be a liability they couldn't afford. How's she taking it? About as well as you'd expect. Megan's been making the rounds, trying to do damage control, but it's not working. Turns out people don't appreciate being lied to, and Megan's been covering for Kara for months. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at your site tonight after your crew leaves. Come alone. E." I showed the message to Rick, who read it and shook his head. "This guy doesn't learn, does he?" "Apparently not. What do you think he wants?" "Probably to threaten you. Maybe try to salvage what's left of his reputation by making you the bad guy." "Well, we can't disappoint him. What time does the crew usually clear out?" 6:30, 7 at the latest." "Perfect. Make sure you stick around tonight. Park your truck where he can't see it, but close enough to hear if things get interesting." "You think he's dangerous?" I considered the question. Ethan was desperate, humiliated, and probably facing divorce. His real estate career was likely over. Who would trust a man who'd been publicly exposed as an adulterer? His wife was a divorce attorney who knew exactly how to destroy him financially. He had nothing left to lose, which made him unpredictable. "I think he's stupid," I said finally, and stupid can be more dangerous than malicious. The rest of the day passed slowly. I kept busy with paperwork and planning for the next week's jobs, but my mind kept drifting to the evening's confrontation. Part of me was looking forward to it. Ethan had walked into every trap I'd set so far, and I didn't expect tonight to be any different. At 6:45, the last of my crew headed home, leaving the site empty except for the security lights and the half-finished foundation we'd been working on. Rick's truck was parked behind the equipment shed, invisible from the main entrance, but close enough for him to intervene if necessary. Ethan showed up at 7:15, driving a rental car. His BMW was apparently still being detailed to remove the soap and saran wrap. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was disheveled, his clothes were wrinkled, and his eyes had the wild look of a man on the edge. "Harper," he said, walking toward me with the kind of swagger that was probably supposed to be intimidating. "Ethan, thanks for coming by. What can I do for you?" "You can stop pretending you don't know what you did." "I'm still not sure what you think I did. As far as I can tell, you're the one who planned to have intimacy with my wife." He stopped about 10 feet away from me, close enough to talk, but far enough to run if he needed to. Smart man. "You sabotaged us. You called our wives, you ruined the hotel reservation, you set us up at the festival." "Set you up? Ethan, you confessed to adultery in front of half the town. I didn't make you do that." "You manipulated the situation. You made us look like fools. You made yourselves look like fools. I just gave you the opportunity. His face was getting red again, the same way it had at the festival. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? Becca's taking the kids. She's freezing our accounts. My business is ruined. That's terrible, I said, and I almost meant it. Almost. But maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to cheat on her. It wasn't supposed to be cheating. It was supposed to be different. Different how? You were planning to have intimacy with someone who wasn't your wife. That's pretty much the definition of cheating. Kara said you wouldn't care. She said your marriage was already over. And you believed her? She was very convincing. I laughed, and the sound seemed to echo off the construction equipment around us. Ethan, did it ever occur to you that a woman who would cheat on her husband might also lie to her boyfriends? He took a step closer, and I could see his hands were shaking. This is all your fault. If you'd been a better husband, she wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. You're right, I said. I should have been a better husband. I should have paid more attention to what she was doing. I should have noticed that she was planning to humiliate me in front of the entire town. I should have stopped her before she could destroy 2 marriages and ruin 3 lives. That's not what I meant. No? Then what did you mean? He was close enough now that I could smell the alcohol on his breath. He'd been drinking, which explained the bravado and the poor decision-making. I meant you should have let her go. You should have given her the divorce she wanted instead of trapping her in a loveless marriage. Loveless? I stepped closer, and he instinctively stepped back. Ethan, she never asked for a divorce. She never said she was unhappy. She never gave me a chance to fix whatever was wrong. She just decided to cheat, and then she decided to make it as public and humiliating as possible. She was going to leave you anyway. No, she wasn't. She was going to use you and Derek to destroy my reputation, take half my business, and paint herself as the victim of an abusive marriage. You weren't her escape plan, you were her weapons. The truth hit him like a physical blow. I could see it in his eyes the moment he realized that Kara had been using him just as much as she'd been using me. That's not... She wouldn't... Read the messages, Ethan. Oh wait, you can't. Because she deleted them all after I exposed her plan. Convenient, right? He lunged at me then, but alcohol and desperation had made him clumsy. I caught his wrist and twisted, using his momentum to spin him around and slam him face first against the concrete mixer. The impact was loud enough to wake the dead, and Ethan crumpled to the ground like a broken marionette. Jesus, Nick! Rick came running from behind the equipment shed. Is he okay? Ethan was conscious but dazed, blood trickling from his nose where it had hit the concrete. His phone had fallen out of his pocket and was lying in a puddle of muddy water. He's fine, I said, helping him sit up. Just a little confused about the difference between attacking someone and having a conversation. I should call an ambulance, Rick said. No, Ethan mumbled through his bloody nose. No ambulance. No police. You sure about that? I asked. Because assault charges might be the least of your problems right now. He looked up at me with eyes that were finally clear. What do you want? I want you to disappear. I want you to stop trying to blame me for the mess you made of your life. I want you to leave my wife alone. Not because I care about her anymore, but because I don't want you dragging my name through any more mud. And if I don't? I picked up his phone and dropped it into the concrete mixer, where it disappeared with a satisfying splash. Then you'll find out exactly how creative I can get when someone threatens me on my own property. Rick stepped forward, a crowbar in his hand. He wasn't threatening Ethan directly, but the message was clear. I think you should go, Rick said quietly, before this gets any worse. Ethan struggled to his feet, holding his nose with one hand and his ribs with the other. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said. It's been over since the moment you decided to mess with my family. You just didn't know it yet. As he stumbled toward his rental car, I called after him. Ethan, next time you want to have an affair, maybe choose someone who isn't married to a man who knows how to use power tools? The sound of his engine fading into the distance was the sweetest music I'd heard all week. Think he'll pay back? Rick asked. No. He's finally figured out that he's not the predator in this situation. He's the prey. My phone buzzed with a message from Anita. Phase 3 is ready. Tomorrow night, motel on Route 9. All players confirmed. I smiled. Ethan and Derek thought their nightmare was over. They had no idea it was just beginning. Monday morning brought news that made my coffee taste even better than usual. According to Mrs. Doyle, who had apparently become my unofficial intelligence network, Kara had tried to move money from our joint accounts and discovered they'd been frozen pending the divorce proceedings. Her credit cards had been canceled due to suspicious activity, and her car had been repossessed after she'd missed 3 payments I'd never heard about. She was seen walking to the grocery store yesterday, Mrs. Doyle reported with barely concealed glee, carrying those reusable shopping bags like some kind of common pedestrian. The image of Kara, who had always insisted on driving her BMW to pick up a single carton of milk, walking to the store like a normal person, was almost too delicious to believe. "That's unfortunate," I said, trying to sound sympathetic. "I hope she's managing okay." "Oh, she's managing. Megan's been driving her around, but apparently that's causing problems too. Megan's husband is not happy about being associated with the scandal." That was interesting news. Megan Carter had been Kara's partner in crime from the beginning, but if her own marriage was starting to suffer, she might be looking for an exit strategy. My phone rang, interrupting my intelligence briefing. It was Anita. "Everything's set for tonight," she said without preamble. "The motel manager is cooperating. Apparently he's not a fan of adultery either. Room 12 will be ready, and I've got confirmation that all our guests will be attending." "What did you tell them?" "Different stories for different people. Kara thinks you want to return her personal belongings without lawyers present. Megan thinks you're ready to negotiate a quiet divorce. Ethan thinks you're going to offer him money to disappear. Derek thinks you want to apologize for ruining his marriage." "And the wives?" "Becca and Linda think they're going to catch their husbands in another compromising situation, which, technically, they are." The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. Everyone involved thought they were getting what they wanted, but what they were really getting was a front-row seat to their own destruction. "What about witnesses?" "Mrs. Doyle will be there with her bridge club. Big Mike from the bar is bringing his regulars. Chief Sullivan is stopping by on his evening patrol. Should be quite a crowd." "Perfect. What time?" 8 o'clock. Don't be late." The rest of the day crawled by like a wounded animal. I went through the motions of work, but my mind was focused on the evening's events. This would be the culmination of everything I'd been planning since I'd first discovered Kara's betrayal. After tonight, there would be no coming back for any of them. At 7:30, I drove to the Sleepy Inn Motel on Route 9, a place that had seen better decades and wasn't particular about what went on in its rooms as long as the rent was paid. Anita had chosen it perfectly. It was exactly the kind of place where people went when they had something to hide. The parking lot was already busy. I recognized several cars: Mrs. Doyle's ancient Buick, Big Mike's pickup truck, Chief Sullivan's patrol car. Anita had done her job well. Room 12 was at the end of the building, with a perfect view of the parking lot and easy access for our audience. I knocked on the door, and Anita let me in. "They should start arriving any minute," she said. "Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for weeks." The first to arrive was Megan, looking nervous and checking her phone constantly. She knocked on the door, and I let her in. "Nick," she said, trying to smile. "Thanks for agreeing to meet. I think we can work this out without involving lawyers." "I hope so," I said. "Have a seat. We're waiting for a few more people." Her smile faltered. "More people? I thought this was just going to be us." Change of plans. Kara arrived 5 minutes later, and the look on her face when she saw Megan was priceless. They'd clearly been expecting separate meetings. "What's she doing here?" Kara demanded. "Probably the same thing you are," I said. "Trying to figure out how to minimize the damage." Derek showed up next, his face still showing the bruises from his encounter with Linda. When he saw the women, he started backing toward the door. "This is a setup," he said. "No," I replied. "This is a conversation. A long overdue conversation." Ethan was the last to arrive, and by the time he walked through the door, the room was thick with tension. His nose was still swollen from our encounter at the construction site, and he looked like he hadn't slept since. "What the hell is this?" he said, looking around at the assembled group. "This," I said, "is the moment when you all stop lying to each other and start telling the truth." That's when the real show began. Anita had positioned herself by the window, where she could signal our audience when things got interesting. Through the thin motel walls, I could hear cars arriving and doors slamming. "The truth?" Kara laughed, but it sounded forced. "The truth is that you're a controlling bastard who couldn't handle the fact that I was moving on with my life." "Moving on?" Derek said. "You told me you were trapped in an abusive marriage." "You told me the same thing," Ethan added. Kara's face went pale. That's not... You're twisting my words." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and started reading. Quote, "Derek is so desperate for attention, he'll believe anything I tell him. He actually thinks I'm going to leave Nick for him." End quote. Derek's face went from pale to green. "You said that about me?" "Or how about this one?" I continued. Quote, "Ethan is like a golden retriever, eager to please but not very bright, perfect for what I need." End quote. Ethan stood up so fast his chair fell over. You called me a golden retriever? That's not the worst part, I said. Want to hear what she said about the hotel plan? Stop, Kara said, but her voice was barely a whisper. Quote, the look on Nick's face when he finds out will be worth everything. He'll be so humiliated he won't even fight the divorce. I'll get the house, half the business, and everyone will feel sorry for me for being married to such a pathetic loser. End quote. The silence in the room was deafening. Outside, I could hear more cars arriving and people talking in low voices. She used all of us, Derek said finally. No, Megan said, standing up. No, this is Nick's fault. He drove her to this. He was emotionally unavailable, intimately inadequate. Inadequate? I laughed. Megan, you've been married to the same man for 12 years. When exactly did you become an expert on my intimate life? Kara told you what she thought you wanted to hear, just like she told them what they wanted to hear. The question is, why were you so eager to help her destroy my life? Megan's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The truth was, she'd been jealous of Kara's marriage, her house, her lifestyle. Helping Kara destroy it all had been her way of bringing her friend down to her level. That's when Anita knocked on the door. Nick, I think you should see this. I opened the door to find the parking lot full of cars and people. Mrs. Doyle was there with her bridge club. Big Mike had brought half the regulars from his bar. Chief Sullivan was taking notes. And standing in the front of the crowd were Becca Brooks and Linda Lynn, both holding manila envelopes that I suspected contained divorce papers. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, I'd like you to meet the people who've been planning to destroy my marriage and humiliate me in front of the entire town. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Cameras started flashing, people started shouting questions. Becca and Linda pushed through the crowd toward their husbands. Derek Lynn, Linda's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. You are served. Ethan Brooks, Becca was right behind her. These are divorce papers. I'm taking the kids, the house, and everything else. Ethan tried to run, but the crowd blocked his path. Derek just stood there, staring at the papers in his hands like they were written in a foreign language. This is illegal, Megan screamed. This is entrapment. Actually, Chief Sullivan said, stepping into the room, this is a public service. Everyone here came voluntarily, and everything that's been said has been said in front of witnesses. That's when Megan made her fatal mistake. Desperate to deflect blame from herself, she pointed at me and shouted, He set this up. He's been planning this for weeks. He's been stalking us, manipulating us, trying to frame us. The crowd went quiet. This was a serious accusation, and if it were true, it would change everything. Frame you for what? I asked calmly. For adultery, for planning to cheat. Megan, I said, did you or did you not help Kara plan to meet these men at a hotel? That's not the point. Did you or did you not lie to me about where my wife was going and who she was meeting? You're twisting. Did you or did you not encourage her to document her affair so she could use it against me in divorce proceedings? Megan's face went white. She looked around the room, realizing that she'd just confessed to conspiracy in front of half the town. But I wasn't done. Rick stepped forward from the crowd, holding his phone. Funny thing about modern technology, he said. Sometimes phones record things even when you don't mean them to. He pressed play, and Megan's voice filled the room. The important thing is to make sure Nick looks like the bad guy. If we can get him to react violently, even better. Kara can claim abuse, get a restraining order, and take him for everything he's worth. The crowd's reaction was swift and brutal. These were people who believed in fairness, in honesty, in treating your neighbors with respect. What they'd just heard was a plan to destroy an innocent man's life through false accusations. You recorded us? Megan shrieked. I recorded you planning to frame my friend for domestic violence, Rick said, which, by the way, is a felony. Chief Sullivan stepped forward. Ma'am, I think you need to come with me. As Megan was led away in handcuffs, the crowd turned its attention to Kara, Ethan, and Derek. The three of them stood there like deer in headlights, finally understanding that they weren't just facing social embarrassment, they were facing complete destruction. Kara Harper, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. You wanted to humiliate me in front of the entire town. How does it feel to be on the other side? She didn't answer. She couldn't answer. The woman who had spent months planning my destruction was finally speechless. As the crowd began to disperse, taking their stories and their photos with them, I realized that my revenge was complete. By tomorrow morning, everyone in town would know exactly what kind of people Kara, Megan, Ethan, and Derek really were. Their reputations were destroyed, their marriages were over, and their futures were in ruins. and I had done it all without breaking a single law. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in a week. The house felt different, cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the air itself. Kara's belongings were gone, packed up and removed while I'd been at Rick's place. The divorce papers were signed, the settlement was fair but firm, and my life was finally my own again. The phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Friends, neighbors, business associates. Everyone wanted to congratulate me on my restraint and dignity in handling such a difficult situation. The story had spread beyond our small town overnight, picked up by local news stations and social media. I was being hailed as the wronged husband who'd sought justice instead of revenge, the man who'd exposed corruption without stooping to violence. If they only knew. By 9 a.m., I was at Murphy's Bar, the unofficial headquarters of our town's information network. Big Mike had opened early, and the place was already full of people rehashing the previous night's events. I ordered coffee and took a seat at the bar, ready to enjoy the fruits of my labor. "Nick?" Mrs. Doyle appeared at my elbow, practically vibrating with excitement. "I heard the most wonderful news this morning." "Oh?" Megan Carter was charged with conspiracy and making false statements to police. Apparently that recording your friend made was enough to prove she was planning to frame you for domestic violence. "That's terrible," I said, trying to look concerned. "I hope she gets the help she needs." "Help?" Mrs. Doyle snorted. "She needs a good lawyer, not help. Her husband filed for divorce this morning, and her employer terminated her contract. Something about moral turpitude and conduct unbecoming. The dominoes were falling exactly as I'd planned. Megan's attempt to destroy me had backfired spectacularly, taking her marriage, her job, and her reputation with it. "What about the others?" I asked. "Oh, they're all finished? Ethan's real estate license is under review. Apparently, adultery is considered unprofessional conduct in his industry. Derek's startup lost its funding when the investors found out about the scandal. And Kara..." Mrs. Doyle paused dramatically. "What about Kara?" "She's been evicted from her apartment. Turns out she'd been using your credit cards to pay the rent, and when those were canceled..." She shrugged. "She's staying at that awful motel on the highway, the same one where you caught them all last night." The irony was perfect. Kara had gone from planning a luxury hotel threesome to living in the same Fleabag motel where her plans had been destroyed. "That's unfortunate," I said. "I hope she lands on her feet." "I doubt it. Word is, no one in town will hire her. Her reputation is... well, let's just say it's not what it used to be." Chief Sullivan walked in, still wearing his uniform from the night shift. He nodded to me and took a seat at the other end of the bar. "Hell of a thing last night," he said to Big Mike. "In 30 years of police work, I've never seen anything like it." "Like what?" I asked innocently. "The way you handled that situation. Most men would have lost their temper, done something stupid. But you kept your cool, let them hang themselves with their own words." "I just wanted the truth to come out. Well, it came out all right, and justice was served without anyone getting hurt." He looked at me with something that might have been respect. "That takes real character." If he only knew about the construction site confrontation with Ethan, or the carefully orchestrated psychological warfare I'd been waging for weeks, he might have a different opinion. But that was the beauty of my plan. From the outside, it looked like I'd simply been the victim of circumstances, reacting to events rather than controlling them. The door opened, and Becca Brooks walked in. She looked tired but satisfied, like a woman who'd finally gotten the justice she deserved. "Nick," she said, approaching the bar, "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "For exposing what Ethan really was. I'd been suspicious for years, but I could never prove anything. Last night gave me everything I needed. I'm sorry it had to happen this way." "Don't be. I'm better off without him." She smiled grimly. "And thanks to the prenup I made him sign, he's not getting a penny of my money or my law practice. He'll be lucky if he can afford a studio apartment when this is all over." Linda Lynn arrived a few minutes later, looking equally satisfied. Derek's financial situation was even worse than Ethan's. His startup was bankrupt, his investors had fled, and Linda was taking him for everything he had. "He actually tried to blame you," she told me. "Said you'd manipulated him into the affair. Can you believe that?" "Some people have trouble taking responsibility for their actions," I said. "Well, he'll have plenty of time to think about responsibility. I'm taking the house, the cars, the savings, everything. He'll be starting over from scratch." As the morning wore on, more people stopped by to share news and gossip. The story kept getting better. Ethan had been dropped by his real estate agency and was facing a lawsuit from a client who claimed he'd tried to seduce her during a house showing. Derek had been forced to move back in with his parents at age 42. Megan was facing criminal charges and social exile. And Kara had simply disappeared. Some said she'd left town in the middle of the night. Others claimed she was still at the Highway Motel, too ashamed to show her face in public. Either way, she was no longer my problem. Around noon, Rick showed up with a bottle of champagne and a grin that could have powered the town. "Congratulations," he said, popping the cork. "You did it." "Did what?" "You destroyed them. Completely, totally, permanently destroyed them. And you did it without breaking a single law." "I didn't destroy them," I said, accepting a glass of champagne. "They destroyed themselves. I just helped them along." "That's what makes it so beautiful. They can't even blame you, because technically you didn't do anything wrong." He was right. Every step of my plan had been legal, ethical, and justified. I'd simply used their own actions against them, turned their weapons into tools of their own destruction. "So what now?" Rick asked. "Now? Now I get back to living my life. I've got a business to run, a house to enjoy, and a future to build. Any regrets?" I considered the question seriously. Did I regret the destruction of 4 lives? Did I feel guilty about the pain I'd caused? "No," I said finally. They made their choices. They planned to destroy me, humiliate me, and steal everything I'd worked for. They thought I was too weak to fight back, too stupid to see what they were doing. They were wrong. What if they try to come back? Try to get revenge? With what? They have no money, no reputation, no allies. They're finished. As if summoned by our conversation, the door opened one last time. Kara walked in, looking like a ghost of her former self. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and her eyes were red from crying. The entire bar went quiet. She walked straight to me, ignoring the hostile stares from everyone else in the room. "Nick," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, I'm begging you. I have nothing left. No job, no money, no friends. I'm living in my car." "That's unfortunate," I said, not looking up from my champagne. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I'm still your wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected. The papers were finalized this morning. "We can work this out. We can go to counseling, start over." "Kara," I said, finally looking at her. "Do you remember what you told Ethan and Derek about me? You called me a pathetic loser. You said I was too weak to fight back. You planned to humiliate me in front of the entire town." "I didn't mean—" "You meant every word. And you know what? You were right about one thing. I was too weak to fight back. The old Nick would have begged you to stay, would have blamed himself for your affair, would have let you destroy him." I stood up and faced her directly. "But I'm not the old Nick anymore. The new Nick learned some things about himself. He learned that he's not as nice as he thought he was. He learned that when someone tries to destroy him, he can destroy them right back. And he learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions." "You can't just leave me with nothing." "I'm not leaving you with nothing. I'm leaving you with exactly what you deserve." The bar was silent except for the sound of Kara's quiet sobbing. Even Mrs. Doyle, who loved drama more than oxygen, seemed uncomfortable with the raw desperation on display. "Please," Kara whispered one more time. "No," I said. "You made your choice. You chose Ethan and Derek over me. You chose humiliation over honesty. You chose destruction over communication. Now live with those choices." She stood there for another moment, hoping someone in the room would show her sympathy or support. No one did. These were the people she'd planned to fool with her victim act. The neighbors she'd intended to turn against me with her lies about abuse and neglect. They'd seen her true nature now, and they wanted nothing to do with her. Finally, she turned and walked out, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Through the window, I watched her get into a rusted Honda that had seen better decades and drive away. "Damn," Big Mike said, breaking the silence. "That was cold." "That was justice," Mrs. Doyle corrected. "She got exactly what she deserved." Rick raised his glass. "To Nick Harper," he announced. "The man who proved that revenge is a dish best served with witnesses." The entire bar raised their glasses and drank. As I looked around at the faces of my friends and neighbors, I realized that I'd gained something more valuable than revenge. I'd gained respect. These people had seen me at my worst moment, and they'd watched me handle it with dignity and intelligence instead of violence and stupidity. The woman who'd tried to destroy me was gone, broken and forgotten. The men who'd conspired with her were ruined. The friend who'd betrayed me was facing criminal charges, and I was standing in a room full of people who admired my restraint and my cleverness. The night the dress stayed home had indeed been the night Kara lost it all, but it had also been the night I found something I didn't know I was looking for. The knowledge that I was stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than anyone had ever suspected, including myself. As the celebration continued around me, I allowed myself one moment of pure satisfaction. I'd played the game better than any of them had imagined possible. I'd won completely, decisively, and permanently. And the best part? They'd never see me coming until it was too late.